Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to SlapShotHockey, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at my 2020 Eastern Conference playoff predictions. On Monday we looked at my Western Conference predictions where I had the Edmonton Oilers making the Stanley Cup final. Now before we get into my predictions, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more hockey content. In our first matchup, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs facing off against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, the Maple Leafs are a very good offensive team, while the opposite is true for Columbus. The Leafs have a pretty bad blue line that no amount of offense can really make up for. Of course, they still have a solid goalie behind it in Anderson, but it isn't a reason to not have defense. Columbus has a solid defense with two inconsistent goalies behind them. When their goalies are on their game, they're some of the best in the league, but Columbus's offense is crippled after this past offseason, and I don't see how they make up for it. I have Toronto winning in 4 games. Our next matchup is between the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Montreal Canadiens. Now, the Penguins are a very solid all-around team. Of course, they have that fantastic 1-2 punch down the middle with Crosby and Malkin and a good amount of depth behind them. They have a strong defensive core and a good young goalie in Tristan Jarry. Now, I don't really know if they'll want to start Murray in the playoffs as he did have a down year. I do think Jarry will be their guy. The Canadiens are a team that aren't really better at offense or defense, but they're also not particularly good at either one. Of course, they still have a great goalie in Carey Price, but I don't see him being enough. I have the Penguins sweeping the Canadiens. This next series is between the Florida Panthers and the New York Islanders. This is a very interesting series to me, as Florida is a team that I think could go far, but only if Bobrovsky plays how he should be playing. If he does, I see no problem for the Panthers to win this series, but realistically, I have to take the Islanders. Their defensive core is just too strong. This next matchup is definitely also an interesting one as well between the Carolina Hurricanes and New York Rangers. Now, I see the Rangers as a team similar to the Panthers in the fact that they could go far, but unlike the Panthers, I don't see anything in particular that needs to go right. I think they just need to play their best hockey and they could go on a run. The Hurricanes were a team like this last year, making the conference finals. They have a very good defense and will only be better with Dougie Hamilton returning, who is having a Norris-worthy season. Their offense is also very good, but where I see the problem is goaltending. Of course, Mrazek was fine last year's playoffs. I'm not 100% sure if he will this year. The Rangers, however, are different in this position with 3 potential candidates. You have Lundqvist, who's older but could be a beast. Then you have Georgiev, who is a very solid goalie. Then you also have Shesterkin, who is playing out of his mind before the stoppage. Because of all this, I have the Rangers winning in 4 games. Of course, before we get into the first round, we must look at how I predict the round robin. In first place, I have the Boston Bruins. Pretty self-explanatory. They were the best team in the regular season, and I don't see that changing. In second place is the Philadelphia Flyers. They were playing great before the stoppage, and I think it will carry over. In third place is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Before you yell at me in the comments, let me explain. The Lightning weren't playing that well at the stoppage, and they also didn't have a great start to the season, which I think could play a part. And last, I have the Washington Capitals. I don't really know why I put them this low, but I think the other teams will do better, so there you go. Our first round matchup is between the Boston Bruins and the Toronto Maple Leafs. This series is one that happened the last 2 years, with the Boston Bruins winning in 7 games each time. The Bruins have fantastic offense, great defense, and fantastic goaltending. There isn't really anything the Bruins are missing. The Leafs, on the other hand, also have great offense, but not really that great of a defense. They do have a good goalie in Anderson, but I think the Bruins still win this time in 6 games. The Bruins were the best team this season for a reason. Our next matchup is also a classic one between the Washington Capitals and the Pittsburgh Penguins, but this time it's in the first round. The Penguins are a good all-around team, and they do have a good goalie in Jerry. The Capitals are a very strong offensive team and have decent defense. In net, I think they will start Samsonov because Holtby did have an off year. I think factoring Washington's explosive offense, I do think they win in 7 games. Next, we have the New York Islanders versus the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are a team that don't really stand out in offense or defense, but are just good all around. Hart is a goalie who I think is already one of the better goalies in the league at such a young age. The Islanders also have two solid goalies in Varlamov and Bryce, but neither really stand out. Their offense isn't the best, but the Islanders' defense is one of the best in the league, if not the best. But even with that, I'll have the Flyers winning in 6 games. The final first-round matchup sees the Tampa Bay Lightning going up against the New York Rangers. The Lightning are a team like the Bruins where they have fantastic offense, great defense, and fantastic goaltending. While I do think Vasilevsky is overrated sometimes, he still is an elite goalie. The Rangers have great offense, decent defense, and I guess good enough goaltending depending on who they start. But I think the Rangers' playoff comes to an end. I have the Lightning winning in 5 games. Honestly, though, I wouldn't be surprised if the Rangers won based on what happened last year. Our first second-round matchup sees the Boston Bruins facing off against the Washington Capitals. These teams offensively are very similar, but I think defensive-wise, I would give the edge to Boston. In net, Rask is an elite goalie, and if Samsonov starts and plays as well as he has, then the same can be said about him. But even with Boston's better defense, I see the Caps winning in 7 games. Next, the Lightning and Flyers versus each other. The Lightning are just a better team than the Flyers, if I'm being honest, and they're pretty much better in every way. They have elite players on offense and defense. Kucherov, Stamkos, Point, Hedman. They also have an elite goalie in Vasilevsky. The Flyers pretty much have the same amount of depth, but not really any superstars. Despite that, I think the Flyers win in 7 games. There's just something special about them this year. In the conference finals are the Washington Capitals versus the Philadelphia Flyers. The defense on these teams I think is similar, not being like super elite, but also not being bad, just somewhere in the middle. I think in net they are also similar, but I think at the moment Hart is the best goalie in this series. Offensively, I think the Caps are better, and that will show as I have the Caps winning in 6 games and moving on to the Stanley Cup finals. Meeting the Capitals in the Stanley Cup final is the Edmonton Oilers. These teams are both very offensive-minded. I mean, if you have McDavid and Draisaitl, it would be weird if you weren't. And same with the Capitals since they have Ovechkin, who arguably is the greatest goal scorer of all time. Washington, I think, does have better defense because the Oilers is pretty bad. Their number 1 D-man is Oscar Klefbom, who I think is a solid defenseman, but is nothing compared to Karlsson. I think Washington also has the advantage in net with either Holtby or Samsonov. You could argue McDavid and Draisaitl are enough for Edmonton to win, especially since they now have more depth behind them, and honestly, I wouldn't disagree. However, I will have the Washington Capitals winning in 7 games and being awarded the Stanley Cup. And that will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and tell me what you thought of my predictions in the comments section. It would also be really appreciated if you smashed that like button and subscribed with post notifications. Have a good day, and bye. Yeah.